Hi everyone. Hi Kalechi, how are you doing?
Hello, Melody. I'm good. I'm good.
That's awesome.
How
It's
are
another
you?
week of Code Jam. Yeah, I'm good.
Yep.
So tell us about you. How did your day go? I hope it went all well. There wasn't any hustle.
Saturday is just like okay, you just have the opportunity to just go, do some other things aside from writing code or sitting at your computer. So I think it's going fine for me, and
I
also
literally dream about Saturdays.
really,
Yeah, I long for it. I will lie. I won't tell you lies, right? There's
but
Monday, there's Tuesday, and I'm like, what's happening? Then there's Friday, there's Saturday, and I'm like,
I thought
oh
you love.
yeah, here we are.
I was like, you love doing this, you love coding, so you shouldn't. Saturdays are for people who doesn't like work. Your work is all about coding, so why do you still dream about Saturdays and weekend?
I think at some point we'll have to find a work-life balance. I think I sit on my computer almost
Yeah,
all the time and write code. And
yeah,
sometimes, yesterday, I got the opportunity to like step out a bit, and I realized that it's been like 3 months or thereabouts. I've not
yeah.
really stepped out of my house, and I was like, "Wow, there's a lot of improvements outside. Is this my town and stuff like that?" It's
Wow.
crazy.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yep.
So next we're going to talk about markers. So markers are generally the new things we've learned over the week and what we want to share with the team or the gang. So Kolechi, can you tell us about your marker?
Okay, so I think this week went pretty well. So I, had to make research on several things. So one of the stuff that caught my attention was the compression algorithm. So if you've been doing backend, you've had times where you need to compress files like using the normal gzip compression and deflates all the things. I think Node.js has a native support for it. Yeah. So I got to know of a new compression or a different compression algorithm, which is new to me because I know sometimes other people might be using it already. So that's called Brutally. So Brutally is a compression algorithm. According to Google, they said it's better than gzip. So yeah, so I got to know of a new compression algorithm named Brutally, and which offers better compression rates better than gzip. Yep. So I
Yeah,
think that's my marker.
mine is a little bit less technical. So when
Okay.
Apple released the studio, what do they call it again? Uh, totally skipped my mind. But
Yeah.
I like
Is it a
I'm
headgear?
yeah, the headgear. Like
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of tech. So the idea of spatial computing, you know, it's very intriguing for me, and the idea that we could be in this world where we kind of have multiple screens and things we could do are kind of
Yeah.
limitless. I mean, technology is very new, and when we go, the more we go, we can do like crazy things. Like you could walk the street of Canada
Yeah.
by VR, AR, and stuff like that. And it's kind of intrigues me and stuff like that. And I was looking a little bit into general algorithm, like as algorithm
Okay.
as a general concept. And I've always loved optimization, code optimization, and stuff like that. And I was looking
Okay.
into algorithms and stuff like that over the week, and nothing much. It's just the general concept and general things I had to look into.
Okay, you were growing your imagination in this world where you could just be in your house and walk through the street of
Yeah,
without being
yeah.
without getting a visa, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. Especially for the fact that I hate going out. Like I would, I'll pay $100 not to go out. So
No, I think that already exists. So we did like to see things they're doing with. I think Meta is already doing that, building virtual
yeah,
worlds
definitely.
where you go
No,
inside and you can go through a museum without even having to go to that museum actually. So you can be walking, wearing the headgear and doing stuff like that. But you
yeah,
know,
I think
it's not
Meta is
well.
doing. Yeah,
It's
sure.
not
Meta
heavily
is
adopted. Yeah.
yeah, Meta is doing it. Ton of other companies are doing the same. But I think I love good resolution, and I
Okay.
love you know I hate when things kind of flicker or kind of there's this lag in
Okay.
things. It's kind of very noticeable for me, and I think Meta does it, but their pass-through mode is not very good, right? I think they
Okay.
have a lot of developments, and I'm not saying Apple. I'm not a Apple ecosystem guy kind of person, but I think Apple has been researching this for about over almost a decade or more now. So they kind of have a lot of good engineering around it. They've had almost a decade to build a software around it, an entire platform. And this is not something you plug into something else or something like that. It's a computer on its own. So you could decide to work with it without your headphone or without your laptop and do some coding or probably install VS Code or something like that and write
Okay.
code out of it, ship to GitHub and stuff like that. So it's gonna be not like a replacement for your phones and stuff like that, but probably it's going to be a substitute for them. And I'm looking forward to it, to testing
Okay.
and using them.
Cool.
Awesome. So let's dive into what we have today. We
Yep.
are looking at deploying front-end apps on AWS CloudFront. Awesome. Like we've been building for a while now, and we've not really had time to do any bit or any form of DevOps. And we thought it'd be very nice to look at how we could deploy a front end application, especially the last one we built on AWS CloudFront. So,
Yep.
what is AWS CloudFront? So AWS CloudFront is a CDN, so it's a content delivery network service, and it helps you. Generally, what CDNs do, they help you improve speed and reliability on your website. So what they do is, say for instance, you have a server in the UK or you have a server in Africa or something, and someone is requesting for an information on your website from Europe, right? So these different CDN around the world, like what they usually do is, if that information already exists on that platform, they will just send it to the user. So what it does, like take for instance, it works as Redis as a cache. So CDNs are generally cache, right? So someone requests an information and the CDN looks, oh, do I have this already? No, I don't. Okay, let me go and fetch it from the main server. They fetch it from there and they relay it back to you. So subsequently, they catch it, right? So when any other person around that area requests for it, they will just deliver it to you very fast at a blazing speed. So
Yep.
AWS Platforms is a content delivery service that helps you improve speed and reliability of your website or application. It does this by catching your content in edge locations, as we've discussed, around the world, so that it can be served to users from location that is close to them. So that's generally what CDNs do. Amazon Platform speeds up distribution of your static and dynamic web content so that users can request contents from remote locations, as we've explained. So how does it really work? We just explained it. So probably you have something on an S3 bucket, right? And a user is requesting for that information. Well, what that does is your usual cache, it goes through that your cache system, and do you have this information? Well, your cache is like, I don't have this, right? So it relays back to your S3 buckets and grabs that information, then sends moves passes it through your cloud front and back to your your user. So subsequently that information is being cached on your cloud front, so that whenever it's requested. Now for instance, let's say you are trying to access a remote server, you deploy an instance on let's say on a server in the UK, and you're very far from the UK. The first time you're going to try to access that server is going to be pretty much slow, because it's not being cached. Now, subsequently, when you do that, it's a bit faster, and that's because of things like platforms and CDNs and stuff like that. But it's the cache, right? Yeah, actually, it's the cache, like we explained. So CDNs are generally cache, and that is what they do. They help in distribution of your, contents and make it way faster. I think there was a time, what's the name? Spotify was facing this issue, where you would have to try to get a music on Spotify, and it would take forever and error out and stuff like that. And after a time, they improved it when they started using CDNs and stuff like that. So that is what AWS platforms does for your service. And you could deploy your instance without a CDN, but then you have to experience downtime sometimes when someone from a remote location is trying to access your server or something like that, and they can't access it because it's very far from them, and there is this general lag or latency or something like that, and it's just difficult. And there are ton of times and times where they can access that content from your server. So it's best to use something that gives you this flexibility of having a high speed delivery to your users if you have a good user base and uh, user experience matter to you. So what are the benefits of AWS platform? Well, it's good to use services like this, but uh, is it going to blow up my budget? Like, is it going to? I know that okay, it helps me speed up my entire process, but why would I not want to deploy my own instance on a server and just make do with what I have instead of blowing up my budget and stuff like that? Well, one of them is speed, right? Like we explained, AWS platforms provides this blazing speed for you, right? So it gives you this speed, and where your contents are cached, anyone from any location can access them. It becomes global, it becomes international. So you don't have to, have a situation. If you have a situation where you want to scale to, probably your business is in Africa, you want to scale to Germany, or you want to scale to Europe, or you want to scale to North America or South America, it's way easier for you because, well, you could just literally scale from on the fly, right? Whereas in other cases where you have, you're managing your instances yourself, you have to deploy your instance on Europe, you go to not the server in North America, deploy your instance, and that is not very practical, right? That increases cost. You have to probably do a lot of provide more server spaces and stuff like that. Proper internet connections and stuff like that, and all that could be handled for you, and it gives you security as well. So AWS platforms by default gives you, converts your whatever you deploy to HTTPS. So that's you know that's a security. So people don't have to see all those weird messages of, this is not a safe site, even if it is. Well, you can't tell people that your site is actually safe when the browser says it's not safe. So people will be scared from your visiting your site. It gives you, strict HTTP, like we said. It gives you other security and other things like those, protect your server, your site from those attacks and stuff like that. So those are things you get from AWS platforms by default. And you should use things like this. And most of the times, you want to use things that's been developed by a very huge company like Amazon and stuff like that, because they consider the things before they give it out to you, and they still like there's this low cost because, well, they have a lot of patronage and they can always make back their money, right? The cost of having these things, providing security for yourself, running SSL and stuff like that, managing keys and stuff like that, and making sure that you have license and stuff like that could all be reduced, and you have AWS platforms doing this for you by default, right? And it's very effective, like we said. Like you don't have to do extras. Like you could scale as you go. So AWS platforms offer you this cost-effective pay as you go pricing. So if you want to scale, you go ahead and scale, just with a click of a button. And if you want to scale down, well, it gives you that option as well, to scale down. And you don't have to do crazy things. You don't have to buy physical servers and scale, or is it horizontally? You don't have to buy physical servers and scale horizontally. I don't know if I'm getting this correct, Kelechi.
Yeah. So this is with AWS CloudFront, you're actually going to just well, scale horizontally depending on how your content is. You might want to be scaling rather vertically, because if you're storing all your stuff in one server, then you want to scale
Okay.
vertically. Maybe you're scaling on disk storage, or you're scaling on RAM, or something like that. Yeah. You can
Okay.
also scale horizontally, because you want to also redirect requests to some different servers, right? That's if you're doing in-premises deployment. But with CloudFront, if you want to scale CloudFront, it's as easy as just choosing to deploy your to an edge location close to the user in that region you're willing to migrate to. Yeah, so that's just it.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Kelechi. I always sometimes it keeps my mind, the kind of differences between vertical scaling and horizontal scaling, and sometimes it does really. So I will tell you this, like,
Yeah, you
I'm
can
like,
just think about it like it's when you scale horizontally, you're increasing the number of instances. So if you
okay,
have one server serving a request, when you scale horizontally, you're having two servers, three servers. But when you scale vertically, you're just scaling on the same server. You're increasing either the storage, you're increasing it. And if it were you were running 1 terabyte, you want to start running 2 terabytes. If you're using 4 gig of RAM, you want to start using 8 gig of RAM and all that. So that's scaling vertically. You're just scaling on the same compute instances rather than adding more instances.
All right, that's cool. That means I had it correct. Yeah, I had it right then. I was thinking scaling vertically is like instances to your existing, your existing.
Hello. I think we lost Melody. Melody, can you hear me?
Connection. Oh, sorry about that. I think
Yeah.
my connection flickered a bit.
Okay. Okay. Let's continue.
So we've talked a lot already, and this is it's as simple as that. I don't think AWS is like, it's more of a practical thing over, the CloudFront deployment is more of a practical thing. Let's actually do some deployment over talking and try to tell you how AWS works and stuff like that. These are things you can read. So let's do some deployment, and with this we'll hand over to our awesome geek in town, Kelechi.
Okay, thank you so much, Melody, for that detailed explanation. I think you covered majorly most of what I've loved to share. And yeah, so without further ado, let's go in and let's get our hands dirty. Let's try to actually see how these things work. Because me, I work by seeing until I see something. Whatever you're saying to me is just theory. Okay, so looking at the diagram here on my screen, you have like a diagram of what we're doing. I think Melody has shared this diagram before. So first of all, before even getting to the diagram, we'll need to build our app because as a front-end engineer, first, you know that for you to deploy your app, like your React app, um, your SolidJS application, you need to build it. Building it is a process of you combining all the bundle files to form your HTML, your CSS file, right? That's what you want to deploy to the server, right? Okay, so on the right here, I just on the screen here, I just have the diagram of what we'll be doing. So after building, we'll push it to an S3 bucket. An S3 bucket is just like a source or a storage solution for our static assets, right? Static assets are the HTML, the JavaScript file needed for our web page, right? And next, we have the CloudFront. CloudFront is a service which Melody explained is a CDN content delivery network provided by AWS. You don't use CloudFront just for web pages, but you also use it for media files like movies, like videos, like music, whatever media assets you like to cache. So as Melody said, this they make use of edge locations, they make use of edge locations which are more closer to the users. So instead of making a request directly to the server, they go to the edge locations closest to them and fetch those information or those data. So there are about 400 edge locations. So you can see the number is high. So next, then after we're done configuring our configuring CloudFront. The next is then I was trying to access the CloudFront URL and looking at our app from a browser. All right. So let's first things first. Let's pull the code. So we're using the previous project we worked on. So during the last stream, we worked on the shopping cart project where we were introducing or talking about SolidJS. So with that, we'll just copy the URL or we'll clone the code and then we'll build it. So I'll just copy this here and so I'll put in my terminal. Yeah, so this is Bizum, I doubt. Okay,
Yeah,
this is the
please.
maximum I can go. So I can just do git clone and I'm cloning the URL to the project, right? So yeah, it's cloning. So I'll just go inside this shopping cart and I'll build the project. So if you look at the package.json file there, to build the project, just run yarn. First of all, I want to confirm that I'm using the right node environment. I'll just beef this up to version 18. And I'll do yarn build to build the project. Okay. Okay. Let me use, I think
I think. You could use npm.
Oh, I could use npm. Okay, so let's use npm build. Sorry, we need to do install first.
Yeah, you need to install.
Yeah, so we just do install, and that was install all our dependencies. Yeah, so we're done installing dependencies. We just do npm run build. Yeah, so this will build our project. So generates the HTML and CSS file. So if we look at that here, you see that inside here there is a folder called this. That folder
Could you
has
zoom
our
in? Could you zoom in,
okay. Yeah,
please?
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
we can see there is a folder. This folder here has our assets file and then our index.html file. So I think inside the assets file you have the JavaScript and then the CSS and whatever image we're using. So it's this folder we'll be pushing or deploying, sending to S3, and from S3, CloudFront will be able to access it from there and serve it to our user. Okay, so we're done building the code. Next, let's configure S3, right? So I'm just going to go out to AWS now, and I think I'll drag this to the right and then I'll move this to the right. All right, so let's go back to AWS, aws.amazon.com.
Is it possible you zoom into that screen as well?
Yeah, zooming in.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
You could
so
maximize that screen since we yeah.
okay,
And
I wanted to keep
okay.
what we're currently doing here on the right.
Yeah, that
But I can
works.
always maximize it. So I'll just, yeah. So on the right here, I'll just log in with my account. All right. So is it still very tiny?
Yeah, it's not best screen, so I think you should just maximize it just
Okay.
for
So I would
activity.
maximize it. Um, okay. So I'll just maximize it and then I'll zoom in. I think this is okay, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. It's just so big on my end.
Yeah, I know. I think you're presenting with your other screens or
Yeah.
your other
Yeah.
monitor. Yeah.
So first, as I said, we'll create the S3 bucket to store and then upload our assets to that bucket. All right, so let's just do that. We'll go back to S3. If you don't see it here, then you just type S3 here. All right, so that'll open up the S3. Just open that up in a new tab. Yeah, so I'm on S3. I just have to create a new bucket. So right here, I'll just click on create bucket. Right, so I'll click on create bucket, and I think isn't it too wide?
I think it's too wide. If you could, I think every time you have to zoom in, you have to find a better zoom in zoom in policy or something that just
Uh,
zooms the entire thing.
okay,
Yeah,
so is it okay now?
yeah. That's zoom in one more time. I think so we could see the test as well. Yeah,
Oh, I think
awesome.
this is so big.
Yeah, it's so
Okay,
big.
so I will give our bucket a name. What should you call this? What do you think we should call this?
I think we should call it shopping thingy or shopping cart or shopping jam.
Okay, okay, shop jam. I'll just call it shop jam. I want to make this unique, so I'll just call it because the name here has to be globally unique. So I'll just say shop jam. 1, 2, 3. So I'll select a region. The region is where I want to create my S3 bucket and all of that. So okay, so even though the S3 bucket is a global console, but most times when you're creating an S3 bucket, you need to select the region where for that bucket. So next, objects access control list, we're disabling it. We're just using the defaults. By default, we're blocking all public access, so no one could publicly start accessing our HTML file. Then we're also disabling versioning. But if you're working for a company where you need versioning, you could enable versioning. And I think that's it. So we're leaving all the defaults and we're just simply clicking on create
So,
bucket.
so just a question, right? This is
Yeah.
not the CloudFront specific. This is like regular bucket stuff.
Yeah, regular bucket creation on AWS.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so as you see here, we've just created our bucket, and let me look for it. So you see shop jam 1, 2, 3. So this is our bucket. Currently, nothing is in it, right? So we just have an empty bucket. All right. So the next thing to do is to upload our assets inside a bucket. Assets are those things that were built. Those things we saw those files we saw as a result of the build. Right.
Okay.
So I'll click here to add folder. So I'll make sure I'm selecting the right project, shopping carts, and I'll go into the dist folder and I'll select the assets folder and I'll upload the select assets folder. Then I have the asset
Mhm.
folder. I also need to add the HTML file.
Okay.
All
I
right.
think I may
So
have a question.
okay.
Is there a way we could like push our contents to
Yeah.
S3 with via code or via a connection or terminal thingy?
Yeah. So we could use the AWS CLI. So I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, but you could use the AWS CLI and just run a command, or you could actually do this from building a CI/CD pipeline. So I think, but during our next jam, we'll be likely be building a CI/CD pipeline for deployments. So there we'll get to use GitHub Action to automatically, whenever there is a new push, you automatically push that to push the files, build the project, and push the files to S3.
Oh, awesome.
Right? So the AWS provides you everything you need, right? So they have a CLI and even an SDK. So from your whatever your application, maybe your server, you could also build assets. Maybe if somebody uploads something, you could send it directly to S3
So if I want to use the probably an SDK or an
CLI.
SDK, are there keys or configurations I need to follow in order
Yeah,
to like do stuff?
Yeah, so for you to use the SDK or CLI, you need to provide, first of all, on the system you're using it, you need to have the AWS CLI installed, and then you need to provide the your public key and your secret key and your secret key ID. Yeah. So with those two, you'll be able to interact with your AWS accounts using the AWS CLI. So how do you get this public key and the secret key? You'll do that by going into in AWS. There's something called IAM. That is Identity
Yeah.
and Access Management. So once you go there, you create a user and create a programmatic user, a user with program access, and by doing that, AWS offers you a public key and a private key. Sorry, a public secret key and secret key ID. So with those two, you'll be able to interact with your AWS account. And also, these keys are based on the kind of permission that is attached to the to the user you create, right? So imagine you're having a large organization, you create users, and each user has their permissions. Whatever they are doing with the key they have, they can only do what the permission registered under the name under AWS IAM.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much about that.
Right. So we're now uploading the second file, which is the index.html file. So this is common with single page application. We only have one index.html file. That's why it's called single page application. And also we have our assets file with all the bundles of JavaScript and CSS. So we all have our files selected. The next thing is we need to select upload. So with that, you can see down here, we're having our files getting uploaded. This is quite fast. We have our files ready. So we have our five icon full. This is a file. I think this is an image. We have the index.html file and all that. So with that said, we have this part taken care of, at least for now. All right. So the next part is actually the big part, which is us configuring CloudFront to talk to this guy and then catch static assets in this guy inside Edge AWS Edge location for our user, right? So to do that, we go over to our search bar and then we type CloudFront. And I'll just open this on a new tab. Okay, yeah, so we're on CloudFront. We're on CloudFront, and this is what you see. If you're actually coming here for the first time, you might actually just see a button asking you to create a distribution. So that's what you see. But since I already have an existing deployment here, I see a list here of the existing deployment. So right away, I'll just click on create a distribution. So a distribution is just like the way we created S3 bucket to store a particular set of files. So for CloudFront, the way you create a certain group of things you want to expose based on a given or a specific URL is a distribution. All right.
Okay.
So we'll click on create a distribution, and then one major thing you need to select while creating a distribution is an origin, right? Where would Cloudfront pull source the data it needs to distribute, right? And that's what we're going to select. Remember, we created an S3 bucket, right? And that bucket name was ShopJam. So we're going to select that bucket as a domain, all right? So we just selected the domain. Next, we want to put an origin path. We don't need an origin path because all our files or the files we want to store is stored on the root path. Okay, so next we have a default name selected
So
here.
give me a sec. Sorry. So if we have an origin path, say SRC, we have to write SRC slash there on the
Yeah,
origin
so you can
path.
put something like SRC, SRC slash,
Okay.
all right?
Yeah. So the
Or
star
just
means, sorry, you added a star. Can you explain what that means?
I think you should just put SRC. You should then whatever request is coming, it's going to go into the SRC folder inside the bucket.
Okay. Also.
Yeah. Okay, so we have it then. How can now the next part is talking about origin access. How would CloudFront access the bucket? All right. Is it public asset? With public assets, your bucket has to be public. And most times when I'm creating this, I don't usually like keeping my bucket public, so I don't select the public assets. Rather, I go for origin access control. So this way, I could create an origin access control which would generate a permission file that will then update my S3 bucket with, so that only CloudFront can access my S3 bucket, and my S3 bucket is not public because my S3 bucket can have maybe files that should be
Sensitive.
shared to the public, right?
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to click that, and I could use an existing origin access, but for the purpose of this exercise, I will just create a new origin access. So I'll name it down S3. Okay, so I'll just create that. And now I have my origin access. After creating the distribution, this will generate a policy for me that I can use. I can then update my S3 bucket to create, update my S3 bucket to create a resource policy. Okay, so I'm not adding any headers. I'm not enabling a shield. These are all additional configuration you could do, right? So the cache behavior is default. Compress object, yes, I'm going to definitely want to compress objects. I want to only allow, or I want to redirect HTTP to HTTPS. We want everyone to access the web page through HTTPS. And then, yes, I'm aligning the get and the head method. All right. So the cache policy by default, I'm using this the default cache policy. You can see here, this is actually where I got to know about the Brooklyn compression because I'm so used to the gzip compression, but you can see that CloudFront supports both the gzip and the Brooklyn compression. Okay.
Oh, that's
So response headers, no, we're not setting anything for that. We're only going to be setting the basic thing we need for a website. This configuration is also needed when it might not be a web page you're trying to distribute. It could be some other things like media files and all that. So it's quite extensive. And then functions association, we're not for this demo, we're not associating any function. So CloudFront has this cool feature where you can have what they call edge functions, right? So you can run connect a Lambda function to run at edge, right? So based on some certain computations, those Lambda functions would run maybe to fetch dynamic data or to decide on what to do and all that, right? So this is a very cool feature. I've used it before for image optimization. So yeah, really cool. It's something you want to like look into.
okay.
Okay, so also CloudFront supports firewall, web address, and web application firewall. You can enable that and all that. Okay, yeah. So okay, so here is another part. This is a very interesting part. Like use all edge locations. use only in North America, use so you can select where you want the cache to be, right? So because if you're building an application and you know all your users is from a given area, maybe they are all in Africa, right? You want to select on use North America, Asia, or middle or the Middle East and Africa because your users are there. But if your users are globally distributed all over the world, then you want to use all location. That way, if somebody is somewhere in somewhere far, maybe somewhere in somewhere not in Africa, they'll be able to also benefit from your CDN network. Okay, so also another cool thing is an alternate domain name. So probably most web application you build, you have a domain name, right? Maybe you registered your domain name on maybe 53, Route 53. You could automatically provide an alternate domain name so that they access your URL, your application, not from the URL generated by CloudFront, but from a domain name you provided, right? So that's what the alternate domain name is used, right? It's used to provide a custom domain name. You can also select the certificates, and you can also choose to select which HTTP version you want to go with. Is it HTTP 3? Would you like to support HTTP 3, or you'd only like HTTP 3 or whatever? So for this demo, I think I should select both HTTP 2 and HTTP 3. Okay, so that's it. Our object root is actually the root object, which is specified
Slash.
here, slash, and that's it. So I'll just add a description of what the app is all about. So that's why I could CloudFront application, and I'll click on create distribution. Okay, so I need to choose if I want to enable firewall or not. For this, I'll just not enable firewall, right? But for this, because this is a demo, I'll just not enable it. So what this does is prevents maybe DDoS attack or something that has to do with security, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just click on create distribution. So you can see here that our distribution has been created. Next, we can see that the S3 bucket policy needs to be a bit updated, right? Remember when I talked about access control? So we
Yep.
need to, for CloudFront to be able to pull those static assets in S3, we need a way to add permissions to allow CloudFront to do that, right? So we'll just copy the policy statement. I will go over to our S3 bucket, and we'll close this, and we'll go under permissions. We'll scroll down and we'll look at the bucket policy. We'll create a resource policy, right? So I'll click on edit here, and I'll paste in policy I created. So if you understand how AWS policy works, you could see that this policy is actually allowing CloudFront to get S3 object, right? And it's specifying the kind of resource, which is the bucket we created, right? And also, this is only possible if the ARN, which is the thing requesting for the access, is equal to the distribution here. So you can see that this matches the name of our distribution, or the distribution ID here, right? So looking at it, you could see that this is our distribution ID E2K, and right here you can see that that's the same thing, right? So this is just allowing CloudFront pull the static assets that was stored on S3. Okay, so I'll just click on Save Changes, and yeah,
I've had
so we've updated
myself,
our bucket. Sorry.
yeah, I had myself one time editing AWS policy, and it was headache for me. Like I had to write a crazy policy, and it was
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's almost crashed a deployment once, and I had to like go and start editing and stuff like that. It was crazy.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, sometimes like like I've been lazy once. Like most times, I'll just give permissions to allow everything. But at some time, especially when you're deploying critical application, you want to add some restriction because like somebody can just come and send a command and wipe out all your entire
yeah,
all
yeah,
your stuff.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I think I'm beginning to find it quite interesting and fairly easy though.
Yeah, I think it gets more interesting over time. you begin
Yeah.
to love it, and security becomes like when you're more security conscious, you grow
Yeah.
to accept what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So currently our distribution is currently deploying. We'll just wait. This will take like a couple of minutes. Yeah, it's take a couple of minutes. So yeah, while that's going on, let's just talk about um, what do you think about the cloud? What do you actually think about the cloud? Do you think it's just someone else's computer?
I think generally, one, I would say this from an optimistic point. It saves the day. Like the cloud saves the day. I mean, imagine a situation where we have to, everybody will have to have their, servers uploading files and stuff like that. That would be crazy. But generally, it's yeah, it is. It's not like it's someone else's computer. It's a kind of a collection of a lot of person's computer, you know, like just everything stored in there and stuff like that. It's just a computer sitting somewhere
Yeah. It is.
in the
It
cloud.
is. But I think they've actually especially the common cloud providers like AWS, Google, and Azure, they put in so much amount of work to get something running, and it's so cool that I could get servers like thousands. There was a time I was doing load testing. Like I
Okay.
spinned up close to 100 servers, right?
Wow.
Uh, just that's just to mention, but if I spinned up 100
Yeah.
servers, each of them interacting with the web application, because I wanted to see if this application could be able to handle certain number of users, right?
Yeah.
So it was so cool where I get to like go through my dashboard and I'm seeing those thousands. I feel like a boss.
Yeah. I mean, like in nerdy field, right?
Yeah,
I know, right?
cool.
And this is something you can't get on your
Yeah,
own. When like you can't go out and buy,
thousand
physical
server.
servers, and you start
Yeah,
you need to buy servers that have GPU, DPU, and all
yeah,
those stuff. Like it's gonna be crazy. I mean, the cloud saves the day, honestly.
yeah. So we have our distribution running here. I think this is it. Yeah, so for us to check if this is working, we just need to copy the distribution name and go over to URL here and we'll paste it. Oh, we're getting access denied. Let me just refresh this a bit. We're still getting access denied. Okay, let me verify this. Did I save the permissions?
I think we may have not. Let's confirm.
Yeah, I've saved
Yes,
the
confirm.
permission.
Yeah, successfully edited. I think we just need to give it a few
Yeah,
seconds or something. Yeah, to update that because in as much as a dashboard is showing optimistic info and stuff like that, it's actually doing a processing somewhere in some computer, right? So
yeah.
sometimes that takes time to you know to resolve.
So while that's happening, let's just check one more time. We can then go into creating okay, that's still
So is there a specific error we are getting? Like, could you zoom into that screen?
yeah, so that's an access denied error. So I think it's trying to access the S3 bucket.
Yeah, could you zoom in just for our visibility so we can all see the error, just in case?
Okay. So we have it already. So that was a minor mistake there.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have the page loading already. We just need to fix some things. So because we did not specify a path, for some reason, it's trying to select, it's looking into the bucket and maybe trying to figure out which file to serve, right? Until I decided to type in .index.html, which is one of the files inside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we need to actually tell it that whenever someone is accessing this URL, every time serve them the index.html file,
Okay.
right? So I was thinking the shopping cart app was meant to show all the cart items.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was. It is. It is
okay,
supposed
so
to.
we'll just add that functionality and we'll just check it back. So for us to do that, we need to add something called error pages, right? So we can create a custom error page, meaning that when that error comes out, I think that's around a 403. Whenever there is a 403, send a customized response, right, with the .index.html file, and then yeah. let the status code be 200 because it's not actually a mistake, right? It's
Yeah.
just that our application is just the index.html file I want to keep serving for each of the URL paths,
Yeah.
right? So we'll create that, and then let's check back. Let's now go to the base URL. But we're still getting access denied. Hold on. Okay, so it's working now.
Okay. Yeah,
Right,
like we
let's
said,
now
it's
slash. Yeah, so it's working now.
okay.
Yeah.
You
So
could share
this
to the comments as well the URL, so just anyone could test.
okay. Can
Just
you
post on
send?
the Yeah, send to me and I will post to the general comments.
Okay, just added it to the chat.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I think you posted on you. Okay, you posted generally. That's cool. So anyone could have access to it. Awesome.
Yep. Okay, so this is it. This is our application now. We have this is what we built during the last code jam section. So it's up and running. See how it is it how easy it is, right? So we went from setting up our S3 buckets. We then configured CloudFront. We then used the domain, the URL that was provided here from the URL that was provided here by CloudFront, which inside the general panel you have it here, and then we were able to access the Apple build. Okay, so that's it. So let's just confirm this is coming from CloudFront. We can just do inspect, and I think it's already known. So we can go to
Yeah, you
inspect
need
and
to zoom in as well. I think you always forget to zoom in because we don't have eagle eyes here. So
yeah. So we can look into network, and I'll just refresh this a bit. Okay, so if we look at the headers of the response, especially the let me see if I can see. You can see that this is coming from CloudFront. You get some, files here, right?
okay.
Let me just confirm the index.js. We can see it here.
I think
It's a
platform
hit
there. It's from
CloudFront,
platform. Yeah.
right? So this tells you that we're not talking to the S3 bucket, but rather we're talking to CloudFront, which is the CDN network that's already closest to me. All right. So
Yeah.
that is um, that is what we actually looking to achieve, and that's what we want to showcase today. So, Melo, did you have any question?
Not really a question. I think generally we have this so much tech in our grabs that we forget how difficult it can be doing these things manually ourselves.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I mean, imagine deploying a physical server to serve an application. I think we should try one of those in one of our jams where we have to deploy an application or serve an application from our local server, so
yeah,
anyone could have access to it for a bit of minutes, and we could demo that as well. That would be very nice, and we would definitely see how difficult it is, and the lag time and everything, the internet battle and everything. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah, like it's and somebody will be like, okay, if I want to deploy my front end app, why don't I just use like I could just there are some easier ways where you just need to click buttons and all that. But the thing is, you could just go on maybe things like Netlify. Those things they still scale very well. But also like if you're already in a company that uses AWS and
yeah,
you're already building your server in AWS, your backend in AWS, why not still host everything in AWS? So you know, and CloudFront, something like CloudFront is highly scalable. Like when I mean, if thousands of users are accessing your app, as the more you only get to pay for the more number
yeah,
of users you have, right? That's the benefit
yeah,
of the cloud, that elasticity, right?
yeah,
Or you paying for just the amount of resource your users are using, right? So
yeah,
that's the problem with having those other part where you want to maintain a physical server or you're using a shared server, right? So with that, you have to always buy a server space, always say, okay, keep this space and all that. So,
yeah,
but something like AWS, most of their services are so elastic that you only pay for the amount of users or number of users using your platform. All right,
Yes.
so that saves a lot of cost, right? Especially for startup, and also for bigger companies as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like that's very awesome. Awesome. Like if you're having a too small amount of users using your server, you don't have to bother with costs. Like you have
yeah,
to pay for exactly what you're using, and there's no like a fixed subscription where you have to buy physical server space. Like you have to buy a 2 gig RAM server space, and when you want to scale, you're like, oh, I need a 8 gig RAM server and stuff like that. No, all you have to do is deploy your instance. When your user starts, when you start growing, AWS will say, okay, now you're growing, we're handling all this traffic. I think we should get more, and they will do that. Like that happens automatically for you. So it's very awesome, very
yep.
awesome.
So we've just done something. So another thing that we need to be aware of is invalidation. It's very important, right? So let's say you're now updating your web page and you want it live, right? Because this is cache. One of the as I read from one of the books I was reading, one of the greatest thing in computer science and engineering is cache invalidation and naming things. I have issues with naming things. Sometimes we want to name a function and your problem is not writing the function itself, it's actually naming it. Oh, what do I call this now? Right? So
Yeah,
the next thing we need to look at is how to invalidate the cache. Let's say you make an update to your web page, your code, your front end engineer made an update to it, or you yourself, you're the front end engineer, made an update to it. How do you clear what's in CloudFront and then allow CloudFront fetch from your S3 bucket? All right, so to do that is what you use invalidation. So you come over to your CloudFront distribution here as I'm already there, click on invalidation and you click on create invalidation. What this will do is this will allow you invalidate all the things stored on CloudFront, right? So for this, I want to invalidate everything. I can just use an asterisk and then I'll just click create invalidation, right? So I can use the slash asterisk rather. Now I'll use create invalidation. And this will now empty instruct all the CDN, all the edge locations to invalidate whatever data they already have cached in there, and then make new requests to the domain bucket, which is the S3 bucket for whatever static assets is inside. So that's what we've currently done. So we're currently invalidating those things, and within a few minutes, I think this would, yeah, it's already completed. And now we can still go to the web page and refresh it, and we should get new content. All right, so that's if we made any content,
yeah.
change.
A practical use case for this will be where a situation where you have something like a language key, or you're using language keys, you're using translations, right? So
Yeah,
sometimes you upload new language keys and stuff like that, and those would show in your code as actual language keys, right? You don't want
yeah,
that. You want actual translation. So in those cases, you have to do cache invalidation, where you connect it to your CI/CD pipeline. So once there's a deployment, your language file or is invalidated automatically. So it pulls everything down to
yeah,
your browser. So your users are always seeing uh, actual languages and not language translations. And that would be crazy. Imagine a situation where the user is going and seeing your code, the code you've written in
yeah.
when they select a particular language. That would be very crazy. So this is an actually use case, and I think I've encountered that sometime before, and yeah, this came true.
So sounds good. So we just did an invalidation and then we refreshed the page. And if you notice, we're seeing a catch miss. That's because for the first request, it goes to the S3 bucket, right? So you can
Yeah,
see that this is coming from the S3, Amazon S3, and there is a catch miss from CloudFront because we've just created an invalidation. So we've emptied the cache. Subsequently, when the first request that comes, it goes to S3 bucket, it fetches it, and then anytime a request comes in again, there will be a cache hit from CloudFront, and we don't have to go to the bucket. It's already cached at the edge locations. So that's it for today, and I so much enjoy doing this.
I do too, right? I do too. Like this is now my next big thing. I mean, I write code, then I do movies as as a thing,
Yeah,
and this is like my next big thing after writing code. Movies could
yeah.
come third. Yeah.
Okay,
All
guys.
right, guys. I want to say this. I don't know why you're not subscribing. Just go ahead and subscribe to our channel because we
Subscribe.
want, yeah, subscribe. We need that subscribers. We need your subscriptions, and
Subscriptions.
yeah, this will encourage us to do more and keep pushing. All right. I hope to see you some other time on the next Code Jam. Peace.